in a raw and deeply personal revelation that has left fans worldwide in shock and solidarity. Iconic TV host Steve Harvey, 68, has broken his silence on his harrowing fight against colon cancer. During an emotionally charged interview on the Great Company podcast, the Family Feud star detailed how the disease not only ravaged his body, but also robbed him of irreplaceable moments with his loved ones. Diagnosed in early 2025 after a routine colonoscopy turned alarming, Harvey underwent major surgery in August to remove portions of his colon and stomach, a procedure fraught with complications that nearly cost him his life. "I missed my daughter's wedding and my grandchild's first-month celebration," he confessed, his voice cracking as he recounted the profound isolation and regret that accompanied his treatment. Throughout it all, his wife, Marjorie Bridges, stood as his unwavering pillar, nursing him through the darkest days and reminding him of the strength in vulnerability. Harvey's journey into this nightmare began subtly, but escalated rapidly. For months leading up to the diagnosis, he experienced persistent fatigue, unexplained weight loss, and occasional abdominal pain, symptoms he initially dismissed as the toll of his demanding schedule, which includes hosting multiple shows, writing books, and managing his media empire. "I thought it was just age catching up," he admitted on the podcast. A family history of gastrointestinal issues, his father battled similar digestive problems before passing in 1990, prompted him to schedule a routine screening in February 2025. The colonoscopy revealed polyps that, upon biopsy, confirmed stage 2 colon cancer. "The doctor said, 'Steve, this could have been worse if we waited,'" Harvey recalled. According to the American Cancer Society, colon cancer is the third most common cancer in the U.S., stowing with over 153,000 new cases expected in 2025, and Black men like Harvey facing a 20% higher incidence rate due to genetic, dietary, and socioeconomic factors. His early detection was a silver lining, but the road ahead proved torturous. The treatment regimen was grueling from the start. Pre-surgery, Harvey endured neoadjuvant chemotherapy to shrink the tumor, a 4-month cycle of intravenous infusions that left him nauseous, weakened, and battling severe side effects like neuropathy in his hands and feet, making even simple tasks like holding a microphone excruciating. "I'd vomit for hours after each session, feeling like my body was poisoned from the inside out," he shared, his eyes welling up during the interview. The August surgery at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles was a marathon 8-hour procedure involving laparoscopic removal of 12 inches of colon and part of his stomach to excise the cancerous tissue. Complications arose immediately. Post-operative bleeding required an emergency transfusion, and a subsequent infection led to sepsis, landing him in intensive care for a week. "I was hooked up to machines, tubes everywhere, fighting for every breath," Harvey described. Recovery involved weeks of hospitalization, followed by home care with drains and IV antibiotics, during which he lost 30 pounds and struggled with depression. "The pain was unrelenting, sharp stabs in my abdomen, constant fatigue. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and the isolation was soul-crushing. The emotional toll was perhaps the most devastating aspect. As a father of 7 children from 3 marriages and a doting grandfather, Harvey's absence from key family milestones hit hard. His daughter Lori's wedding in July 2000, July 25, proceeded without him, as he was confined to his hospital bed post-surgery. Watching it on video call, I broke down. "That's my baby girl," he said, choking back tears. Similarly, he missed his grandson's 1-month celebration, a cherished family tradition. "Cancer doesn't just attack your body, it steals your joy, your presence," Harvey lamented. Statistics from the CDC highlight how colon cancer disproportionately affects Black families, with survival rates 10% lower due to later diagnoses and access barriers. factors Harvey now advocates against. Through it all, Marjorie Bridges, his wife since 2007, was his rock. She slept on the hospital couch, held my hand during chemo, and reminded me I'm not alone, he praised. Marjorie, a fashion entrepreneur, has been vocal on social media about the strain, posting updates like, "Steve's fighting like the warrior he is, but this disease tests us all." In the podcast, the 68-year-old star opened up about his deepest fears, admitting a profound terror of death that haunted him during treatment. "I've stared down failure in comedy, but nothing prepares you for thinking, 'This might be it,'" he said. Yet, he drew strength from family love and performing for fans. Harvey fondly recalled his most recent performance at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas in June 2025, just before surgery. "The crowd's energy pulled me through. Their laughter was my medicine." Currently, Harvey is in recovery mode, focusing on physical therapy to regain strength and a strict diet to rebuild his digestive system. He plans to return to Family Feud in early 2026, launch a new podcast series on resilience, and pen a memoir titled Surviving the Storm, detailing his health ordeal. Despite ongoing battles with fatigue and digestive issues, he remains open about his goals, such as advocating for colorectal screenings and living more mindfully. "I'm eating clean, meditating, and cherishing every hug." Harvey's resilient personality and optimism have shaped his daily life even post-hardships. After the infection and complications, he required a second surgery in October 2025 to restore digestive balance, involving reconstructive procedures that extended his hospital stay. Undeterred, he believes full recovery is imminent and aims to spend more quality time with family. Harvey shares his thoughts on social media, touching millions worldwide. What's particularly impressive is how he views even the darkest moments as opportunities to inspire hope in others. "If my story saves one life through early detection, it's worth every pain," he told the podcast host. Fans and colleagues have rallied around him. Oprah Winfrey commented on his post, "Steve, your strength is legendary. Praying for you." Kevin Hart tweeted, "Big bro fighting the good fight. We're with you." The outpouring reflects Harvey's impact. From his radio show, The Steve Harvey Morning Show, reaching 8 million listeners weekly, to authoring bestsellers like Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, 2009, which spawned a film franchise grossing over $100 million. His net worth, estimated at $200 million, stems from ventures like the Steve Harvey Global brand. But his true legacy is in mentoring and philanthropy, such as the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation aiding underserved youth. As Harvey continues his fight, his message resonates. Adversity builds character. "I've been knocked down before, in comedy, in life, but I always get up," he said. With Marjorie by his side and fans as support, Harvey's journey inspires hope amid despair. This is far from the first time this 68-year-old icon has stared down brutal adversity. And if you're ready to walk through one of the most painful, untold chapters in the entertainment world, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell right now, because you don't want to miss the real stories behind the legends we think we know. Now, let's look back at Steve Harvey's profoundly challenging life journey, from the years of homelessness and financial collapse to the heartbreaking family struggles and relentless battles that ultimately shaped the global entertainment powerhouse he is today. Born Broderick Stephen Harvey, on January 17, 1957, in Welch, West Virginia, Steve entered a world where coal dust filled the air and poverty was as common as breathing. His father, Jesse Harvey, descended into coal mines every single day, risking his life in the darkness to put food on the table for 5 children. His mother, Eloise, held the family together with whatever strength she could muster. But the poverty wasn't the worst part of Steve's childhood. The worst part was the stutter. Imagine being a child with thoughts, ideas, dreams bursting inside your head, but every time you try to speak, your mouth betrays you. The words get stuck. Your classmates laugh. They mimic you. They give you cruel nicknames like Va-Va-Vroom, because to them, your struggle to communicate is nothing more than entertainment. Steve wanted to disappear. He wanted to be invisible, because being seen meant being mocked. One day, a local deli owner noticed the young boy's struggle. This stranger, whose name has been lost to time, but whose impact lasted forever, taught Steve a simple technique. Before saying a difficult word, repeat it 3 times silently in your head. It was such a small gesture, such a simple piece of advice, but it changed everything. Slowly, painfully, Steve learned to control his speech, but he never forgot how it felt to be laughed at, to be reduced to a joke. And perhaps that's why, decades later, he became so good at making people laugh. He turned his deepest pain into his greatest strength. But the scar remained. It still remains. In 1985, Steve Harvey made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was 28 years old, married to Marcia Harvey, with twin daughters Brandy and Carly, who were just 3 years old, and a newborn son, Broderick Jr. He had a steady job selling insurance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. It was responsible. It was what a father should do. But then came that night at Hilarity's Comedy Club in Cleveland. His friends dared him to get on stage and tell jokes. Steve, who had never performed stand-up before in his life, took the microphone. And something magical happened. People laughed. They really laughed. And at the end of the night, the club owner handed him $50. $50 for making people laugh for a few minutes. It was more money than he'd made in a day at any job he'd ever held. Steve looked at that money and he saw a future. Not a practical future, not a safe future, but a future where he could be himself, where his gift could flourish, where he could be more than just another insurance salesman struggling to make ends meet. So he quit. He walked away from the steady paycheck, from the health insurance, from the stability that his young family desperately needed, and he hit the road as a stand-up comedian. Marcia didn't understand. How could she? Her husband had 3 young children and a mortgage, and he was abandoning it all to chase a dream that had less than a 1% chance of success. When Steve sent home whatever little money he made, it was never enough. How could it be? Comedy club gigs paid $50 here, $75 there. Sometimes nothing at all. The marriage didn't survive. In 1994, after 13 years together, Steve and Marcia divorced. Brandy and Carly were 12 years old. Broderick Jr. was just 10. Years later, his daughters would tell him, "Dad, we understand why you left us. You didn't belong to us. You belonged to the world." But that understanding came much, much later. For years, Steve Harvey had to live with the knowledge that he had chosen his dream over his children, that he had missed their childhood, that he had failed them as a father in the most fundamental way. "That's something I'll never get back," Steve has said, his voice heavy with regret. "Those years with my kids, I can't get them back. No amount of success makes up for that." What most people don't know is just how close Steve Harvey came to complete and total destruction. After leaving his family to pursue comedy, Steve found himself living a nightmare that would break most people. For 3 years, from roughly 1986 to 1989, Steve Harvey was homeless. Not temporarily between apartments, not couch surfing, homeless, living in his 1976 Ford Tempo, 3 years. Let that sink in. Over 1,000 days sleeping in a car. Over 1,000 nights without a bed, without a shower, without a home. He was in his late 20s and early 30s, the prime of his life, sleeping on the back seat of a beat-up car, parking in truck stops and quiet streets, hoping the police wouldn't knock on his window. "I had a little igloo cooler in the back," Steve recalls. "That was my refrigerator. I mostly ate bologna sandwiches. That's all I could afford. When I needed to wash up, I'd go to gas stations or public pools. If I was lucky enough to have a gig somewhere far away, they'd put me up in a hotel for the weekend. Those were the best nights, when I had a real bed and a real bathroom. But most nights, there was no hotel. Most nights, Steve would finish his comedy set, collect his $50 or $75, send most of it home to his kids, and return to his car. In the winter, he'd shiver under whatever blankets he could find. In the summer, he'd sweat through the humid nights, windows cracked just enough for air, but not enough to invite danger. He was hungry, constantly hungry, not just for food, but for validation, for proof that this insane decision he'd made, this sacrifice of his family, was going to mean something. There were nights when Steve sat in that car and cried, nights when he questioned everything, nights when he wanted to quit, to go back home, to admit defeat and beg for forgiveness. Every person has that moment when they want to turn around, Steve has admitted, when you say to yourself, this is too much. I had that moment many, many times. But there was something inside him that wouldn't let him quit. Call it stubbornness. Call it faith. Call it delusion. But Steve Harvey refused to give up. One night, sitting alone in his car in the darkness, Steve heard what he believes was the voice of God, not audibly, but internally. A message that said, if you keep going, I will take you places you've never been. So he kept going. Through the hunger, through the loneliness, through the absolute rock bottom of human existence, Steve Harvey kept performing, kept telling jokes, kept believing that somehow, some way, this would all be worth it. But here's the tragedy. Even after he became successful, even after he became rich and famous, Steve Harvey never forgot what it felt like to be homeless. The trauma never left. To this day, Steve admits that he's terrified of losing everything. I'm running from homelessness, he's confessed. I can never be in that situation again. If one show gets canceled, I have 3 others. I don't have downtime, but I have 12 jobs. At 68 years old, worth $200 million, Steve Harvey is still running from that Ford Tempo, still running from those 3 years of hunger and desperation. Success didn't erase the fear. It just gave him more to protect and more to lose. You'd think after finally achieving success, Steve's personal life would stabilize. You'd be wrong. In 1996, Steve married Mary Shackelford, also known as Mary Lee Harvey. They had a son together, Winton, born in 1997. For a while, it seemed like Steve had found stability. His career was taking off. He had a new family. And the homeless years were finally behind him. But the marriage was troubled from the start. Steve would later admit, I've never been in a healthy adult relationship. I was never faithful. I was never fully respected. When Steve and Mary divorced in 2005, it became one of the ugliest celebrity divorces in recent memory. Mary went public with accusations of infidelity, emotional abuse, and abandonment. She claimed Steve had affairs throughout their marriage and left her financially devastated. In 2011, Mary posted YouTube videos accusing Steve of terrible things, painting a picture of a man who had destroyed her life. Steve denied most of the accusations, but the damage was done. His public image was tarnished, and once again, he had failed at marriage. Once again, he had a son who would grow up in a broken home. The divorce settlement reportedly left Steve with just $1,700. After years of building wealth, after finally escaping poverty, Steve Harvey was nearly broke again. His TV show had been canceled. His LA radio show had ended. He was living on residuals from the Kings of Comedy. But it wasn't much. At 48 years old, Steve Harvey found himself starting over, again. But this is where Steve Harvey's story takes an unexpected turn. This is where we see that sometimes the universe gives you a second chance. In 1987, when Steve was still performing in small comedy clubs, still years away from homelessness, He was doing a show in Memphis, Tennessee. A woman walked in late and sat in the front row. Marjorie Bridges. Steve stopped mid-performance and said to her, "I don't know who you are, but I'm going to marry you someday." The audience laughed, thinking it was part of the act. But Steve was serious. He had fallen in love at first sight. They started dating. But here's the thing Steve has never fully explained. While he was dating Marjorie, he was homeless. He was living in his Ford Tempo, performing at comedy clubs, barely scraping by. How do you date the woman of your dreams when you don't even have a place to live? How do you take her to dinner when you're eating bologna sandwiches to survive? The answer is, you can't. Not really. Not honestly. After about a year and a half, Steve disappeared. He ghosted Marjorie without explanation. He just stopped calling, stopped showing up, stopped existing in her life. "I knew he was the one right after I started dating him," Marjorie would later say. "But then, he just left, disappeared." Why did Steve do it? Because he was ashamed. Because he had nothing to offer. Because he loved her too much to let her see him at his lowest. So he walked away from the best thing that had ever happened to him. And for nearly 20 years, Steve Harvey lived with that regret. Through his marriage to Mary, through his kids, through his success, he never forgot Marjorie. He never stopped wondering what might have been. The day before Thanksgiving 2005, Steve Harvey's divorce from Mary was finalized. It was a devastating time. He had lost his marriage, most of his money, and his public reputation was in tatters. He was depressed, angry, and directionless. The next day, Steve was in Las Vegas, trying to escape his thoughts by gambling at a casino. He was deep in a game when his bodyguard interrupted him. "Boss, I think you need to take this call," the bodyguard insisted. Steve was annoyed. You don't interrupt a man when he's gambling, especially when he's trying to forget his problems. But his bodyguard wouldn't take no for an answer. On the other end of the line was a voice Steve hadn't heard in 18 years. Marjorie. I said, "Hello?" Steve remembers. She said, "Boy, what you want?" And I said, "Marjorie?" I recognized her voice from 1987 to 2005. After some back and forth, including Steve jokingly asking about her punk-ass husband, he learned that Marjorie had been divorced for 4 years. Steve's heart nearly stopped. She was single. She was available. And he was single. Without hesitation, Steve said, "I'm getting a jet and flying to Memphis tomorrow. Will you have lunch with me?" Marjorie set a boundary immediately. "I don't date married men." Steve replied, "I just got divorced yesterday." It was true. His divorce had been finalized literally the day before, but because of his celebrity status, the news hadn't gone public yet. Steve chartered a private jet and flew to Memphis the next day. When Marjorie walked into the hotel lobby, Steve had one thought. "I let you get away one time. You're not getting away this time." But here's the heartbreaking part. Steve was broke. After his divorce, after losing his shows, after paying his ex-wife, Steve Harvey had $1,700 to his name. Here he was, trying to win back the love of his life, and he had almost nothing. "When I got that divorce, I had $1,700, Steve admitted. At that time, my Steve Harvey's big-time TV show had ended. My LA radio show had ended. I was living on residuals from the kings of comedy. I had nothing." But Marjorie didn't care. She had her own money, her own career, her own life. What she wanted was Steve, the man, not Steve, the celebrity, or the wallet. "That girl got in that foxhole with me and built," Steve has said with emotion. "She didn't marry into riches. She married into nothing, and we built this together." On June 25, 2007, Steve and Marjorie got married. And for the first time in his life, Steve Harvey found something he'd been searching for his entire existence: peace. Steve brought 4 children into the marriage: Brandy and Carly from his first marriage, Broderick Jr. from his first marriage, and Winton from his second. Marjorie brought 3 children, Morgan, Jason, and Lori, from her previous relationships. Steve officially adopted Marjorie's children and gave them his last name. 7 kids total, a blended family that, against all odds, actually blended. For Steve, this was redemption, a second chance at being the father he failed to be the first time. A chance to be present, to be involved, to not miss the birthdays and graduations and little moments that he'd sacrificed for his career. Lori Harvey, in particular, became like a biological daughter to Steve. He walked her down the aisle at her birthday parties, protected her from media scrutiny, and treated her exactly like his own flesh and blood. When the world tried to judge Lori for her dating choices, Steve defended her fiercely. But here's the painful truth. No matter how good of a father Steve became to Marjorie's children, he could never get back the years he lost with his own. Brandy and Carly grew up without him. Broderick Jr. barely knew his father during his formative years. Those scars don't heal just because Dad finally became successful and present. Steve has been candid about this pain. "I failed as a father," he's admitted. "I can be honest about that. I chose my career over my kids, and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." You can't get that time back. At 68, Steve Harvey is now a grandfather to 8 grandchildren. He gets to be present for them in ways he wasn't for his own children. But every moment with his grandkids must serve as a reminder of what he missed with his kids. Every birthday party, every school play, every little achievement is tinged with the memory of absence. That's the tragedy of redemption. You can fix your mistakes, but you can't erase them. In 2012, at the height of his career, Steve Harvey made a decision that confused many of his fans. He walked away from stand-up comedy. Steve Harvey, one of the original kings of comedy, the man whose stand-up specials sold millions, who could pack arenas with nothing but a microphone and his stories, suddenly quit. No farewell tour, no big announcement, he just stopped. For years, Steve gave vague explanations. He said he wanted to focus on television. He said he'd done stand-up long enough. But in September 2025, at age 68, Steve finally revealed the truth in an appearance on the Pivot podcast. "I saw the change coming," Steve explained. "Change is inevitable. You have to react or participate. So my participation was to stay away from it because cancel culture started being everywhere." There it is. The truth everyone suspected, but Steve never confirmed. He quit stand-up comedy because of cancel culture. "All you gotta do now is look at how cancel culture works," Steve continued. "Comedy is too hard to do right now." Steve had watched what happened to other comedians. One wrong joke, one misunderstood bit, one comment taken out of context, and careers ended. Friendships dissolved. Entire legacies erased overnight. And Steve, who had fought so hard, who had sacrificed so much, who had climbed out of homelessness and poverty to build his empire, was not willing to risk it all on a single poorly received joke. He gave an example. In 2022, during an episode of Judge Steve Harvey, he took a picture with a participant and said, "I gotta get that picture, because you're the dumbest guy I've ever met, and I don't want to forget your face." ABC executives called him in. "Steve calling someone dumb isn't politically correct," they told him. Steve was baffled. "Okay, so what is he?" he complained to Jimmy Kimmel. "We're having a little bit of trouble with political correctness." And that's exactly the problem. Steve Harvey built his career on being authentically himself, on saying what was on his mind, on connecting with audiences through raw, unfiltered honesty. But in today's world, that authenticity is a liability. So in 2012, Steve Harvey performed his last stand-up show at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. It was a 2-hour pay-per-view special, and then he walked away from the art form he loved most. "I don't want to be in a situation where one wrong sentence could destroy everything I've built," Steve explained. "I have too much to lose." At 68 years old, Steve Harvey is wealthy beyond measure, but he can't do the one thing that made him happy in that comedy club in Cleveland back in 1985. He can't tell jokes freely. He can't be completely himself because the cost of one mistake is too high. That's heartbreaking. To achieve everything you ever wanted, only to realize you can't fully enjoy it because one wrong word could take it all away. If there's one thing that has tormented Steve Harvey in recent years, it's the constant barrage of rumors about his marriage to Marjorie. In August 2023, explosive rumors surfaced, claiming that Marjorie had cheated on Steve with both their family chef and their bodyguard. The rumors suggested that Marjorie was demanding a $200 million divorce settlement, essentially half of Steve's net worth. The rumors spread like wildfire on social media. Bloggers speculated. Gossip sites reported it as fact. Fans chose sides. And Steve and Marjorie's marriage became a topic of public debate. At the InvestFest event in Atlanta, Steve finally addressed the rumors directly. "I'm fine. Marjorie's fine," he told the crowd. "I don't know what y'all doing, but find something else to do, 'cause we fine. Lord, have mercy. Sometimes you want to respond, but I ain't got no time for rumor and gossip." But the rumors didn't stop. In 2024, fans noticed that Steve's twin daughters, Brandy and Carly, were absent from family vacation photos in Italy, sparking speculation about family rifts. People analyzed every Instagram post, every public appearance, looking for signs of trouble. Then, in December 2024, an AI-generated article falsely claimed that Steve Harvey had died. The article, predated for December 19th, was published on Newsbreak on December 18th and trended for hours before being taken down. This wasn't even Steve's first death hoax. In October 2024, rumors claimed he died in a car accident. In July 2023, he had to address another death hoax, tweeting a photo of himself looking at his phone in disbelief with the caption, "Me seeing that R.I.P. Harvey is trending." Imagine being 68 years old, having built a successful career, having found love after years of loneliness, and constantly having to defend your existence, constantly having to prove you're alive, that your marriage is real, that your happiness is genuine. "I'm sick of it," Steve told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. "My wife came to me and said, 'Do we have $400 million? Nah, not yet.'" He can joke about it, but the pain is evident. "They act like I don't have family. My 7 children and 5 grandchildren have to see this slander." In June 2025, Steve and Marjorie celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary with elaborate Instagram tributes featuring romantic moments in Paris. But even that couldn't stop the rumors. People still speculate, still gossip, still doubt. At 68, Steve Harvey can't even enjoy his marriage in peace. Every public appearance is scrutinized. Every smile is analyzed. Every moment of affection is questioned. "The woman I married is a good woman," Steve has said. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me. She's God-fearing, she's loyal, she's faithful, and she's a kind and loving person. I don't care what nobody says." But he does care. How could he not? When you've been broken before, when you've lost everything before, the fear of losing it again never truly goes away. In recent years, Steve Harvey has been more open about his health struggles, revealing challenges that many didn't know he faced. In April 2023, during an appearance on Shannon Sharpe's Club Shay Shay podcast, Steve admitted, "I had high blood pressure, this thing called Sjogren's syndrome, which is an immune disorder. My white blood count was low. I couldn't get it up." Sjogren's syndrome is a chronic autoimmune disease where the body's immune system attacks its own moisture-producing glands. It causes dry eyes, dry mouth, and can affect other organs. It's a condition you carry for life, managing symptoms, but never curing the disease. Steve also revealed he had been dealing with prediabetes, sleep apnea, and low vitamin D levels. These aren't minor inconveniences. These are serious health conditions that, if left unmanaged, can lead to heart attacks, strokes, and worse. In November 2023, on the Ultimate Human podcast with Gary Brecka, Steve discussed the lifestyle changes he's made to improve his health. First of all, my energy is completely different, totally turned around. My sleep has completely turned. My mental focus has come back. He revealed that after making significant changes, he no longer needs the blood pressure medication he'd been taking. That's positive news, but it's also a reminder of how close Steve came to serious health consequences. In mid-2024, reports surfaced about Steve taking a brief hiatus from his hosting duties due to a health scare. The specifics were kept private, but the fact that the 67-year-old needed to step away from work raised concerns among fans. Steve called his health the most important thing right now. But here's the tragedy. Steve didn't start taking his health seriously until he was in his mid-60s. For decades, he pushed his body to its limits, working 12 jobs simultaneously, sleeping little, eating poorly, and ignoring warning signs. "I'm running from homelessness," Steve has admitted. That fear, that trauma, from 3 years in a car, drove him to overwork himself to the point of health problems. The very thing that motivated his success also damaged his body. At 68, Steve Harvey is finally learning to slow down, but the damage has been done. The stress, the overwork, the decades of poor self-care have taken their toll. He can manage his conditions now, but he can never fully reverse the effects. Here's something most people don't understand about Steve Harvey. He can't stop working. Not won't. Can't. Steve currently hosts or produces numerous shows. Family Feud, Celebrity Family Feud, The Steve Harvey Morning Show, a nationally syndicated radio program, Judge Steve Harvey, and various other projects through his production company, Steve Harvey Global. He's writing books. He's giving motivational speeches. He's building businesses. He's developing new shows. At 68 years old, when most people are enjoying retirement or at least slowing down, Steve Harvey is operating at full throttle. "If one show gets canceled, I have 3 others," Steve has said. "I don't have downtime, but I have 12 jobs." Why? Because that 3 years in the Ford Tempo left a scar that will never heal. Because Steve Harvey is, in his own words, running from homelessness. Because no matter how much money he has, no matter how secure his career seems, there's a part of Steve that will always be that 30-year-old man sleeping in a car, eating bologna sandwiches, wondering if he made the biggest mistake of his life. Marjorie has expressed concerns about Steve's work schedule. His children have mentioned that he's always busy, always working, never truly at rest. But Steve can't stop. The trauma won't let him. "I never forget that acting and hosting is just play," Steve has said. "I love my work, but I don't pretend for even a minute that what I do is more important than being a teacher or a doctor. I'm just an adult being paid to pretend." There's a sadness in that statement, a recognition that despite all his success, despite all the joy he brings to millions, Steve doesn't fully value his own work. It's as if he still sees himself as that struggling comedian, that homeless man, that failure who abandoned his family. At 68, with everything he could possibly want, Steve Harvey still can't give himself permission to rest. And that might be the saddest part of all. In recent years, Steve Harvey has become increasingly philosophical about his life and the choices he made. He's used his platform to share lessons, often speaking directly to young people who might be on the verge of making the same mistakes he did. "If I could go back," Steve has said, "I would tell my younger self, you can have success without sacrificing your family. I thought I had to choose. I thought I had to give up being a father to become successful. But that was a lie. You can do both. It's harder, but you can do it." He's also talked about the cost of holding on to pain. "For years, I was angry," Steve admitted. "Angry at my father for not being around more. Angry at my first wife for not understanding my dreams. Angry at myself for my failures. But all that anger did was eat me alive. It didn't change anything. It didn't fix anything. It just made me bitter. Steve has spoken candidly about his faith, crediting God for saving him during his darkest moments. When I was living in that car, ready to give up, I heard a voice tell me to keep going, he shared. That wasn't my voice. That was God. And if God can pull me out of that car, if he can turn my life around, he can do it for anyone. But perhaps the most heartbreaking lesson Steve has shared is this. Success doesn't heal old wounds. It just gives you better bandages. All the money in the world can't bring back the years I missed with my kids. All the fame can't erase the pain I caused my first wife. All the awards can't make me forget what it felt like to sleep in that car, hungry and alone. At 68, Steve Harvey has achieved everything he ever dreamed of, but he carries the weight of everything it cost to get there. This is the part of Steve Harvey's story that people don't want to hear. They want the rags to riches tale. They want the motivational speech about never giving up. They want the happy ending. But the truth is more complicated. Steve Harvey did make it. He did become successful. He did find love. He did build an empire. But he also destroyed his first marriage. He also missed his children's childhoods. He also spent 3 years homeless. He also developed health problems from decades of stress. He also lives in constant fear of losing everything. He also can't do stand-up comedy anymore because he's afraid of being canceled. Success came with a price. And that price was higher than Steve ever imagined it would be. At 68 years old, Steve Harvey stands at the peak of his career. But when he looks down, he sees all the bodies he had to climb over to get there. His own body, broken by years of overwork. His first wife, left behind to raise 3 children alone. His kids, who grew up without a father. His health, compromised by decades of neglect. His passion for stand-up comedy, abandoned because the risk became too great. This is the tragedy that nobody wants to acknowledge. Sometimes even when you win, you lose. Steve Harvey is living proof that you can achieve the American dream and still carry wounds that never heal. That you can have $200 million and still be running from the fear of being broke. That you can be married to the love of your life and still be haunted by the relationships you destroyed to get there. When you see Steve Harvey on your television screen, remember this: you're not seeing the whole person. You're seeing the survivor. You're seeing the man who refused to quit even when quitting was the logical choice. You're seeing someone who paid a price that most people wouldn't be willing to pay. But you're also seeing someone who carries scars, who lives with regret, who can't stop running even though the race is over, who achieved his wildest dreams but lost parts of himself in the process. At 68, Steve Harvey's tragedy isn't that he failed. His tragedy is that he succeeded, and success couldn't heal the wounds that failure left behind. He's a grandfather now, a husband, a media mogul, an inspiration to millions. But he's also still that boy who stuttered, that father who abandoned his kids, that homeless man in a Ford Tempo, that comedian who can't do comedy anymore. All of these Steves exist simultaneously, and perhaps that's what makes his story so heartbreaking. Because it's not a simple story of triumph. It's a complex, messy, painful story of what it actually costs to rise from nothing to everything. Steve Harvey made it. But the question remains, was it worth it? Only Steve can answer that. And based on everything he's said over the years, I'm not sure even he knows the answer.